Well, hello there. I hope you're doing well. Today I'm drinking some decaf. It's it's quite a I mean, it's the same one that I almost always drink. It is very light. It is fruity, really delicious, and it's really kind of smoky here in California. We've got a bunch of forest fires surrounding us, so not going outside right now. So today we're going to talk about a set of books about Silicon Valley, and this is to celebrate Elon Musk becoming a trillionaire very briefly. Since then, the source of his wealth has kind of gone up and down with SpaceX, kind of bouncing like a dead cat, as they like to say. There are a number of reasons for this, specifically the fact that major companies are looking at their AI investments right now and asking, where's the ROI? This started with the Uber CTO saying they blew through their AI budget in less than 5 months. Much of the supposed value of SpaceX came from the XAI portion of the business. Somehow X, formerly Twitter, was able to merge with XAI, and then XAI was able to merge with SpaceX without any real regulatory scrutiny. So to understand things a bit more, I decided to read 2 books. The first one is Gilded Rage by Jacob Silverman, published in October 2025. The second book is a little bit more recent, Muskism by Quinn Sobidian and Ben Tarnoff, published in April 2026. Silverman's book I had started and stopped once before. The book claims to dig into the rightward turn of Silicon Valley kind of in general, with Musk on the cover wearing like a golden crown. He's discussed most at the beginning of the book, and then Silverman does a survey of major Silicon Valley personalities, including Mark Andreessen, Joe Lansdale. He was one of the founders of Palantir, Peter Thiel, Jason Calacanis, who worked with Musk on Twitter, and then David Sachs, who also worked with Musk on Twitter. Most of these guys are part of the PayPal mafia. Not all of them, but a good number of them. Much of the start of the book focuses on Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. This, of course, digs into how Musk used Twitter, how he changed his usage of Twitter, and got radicalized on Twitter. Move on to discuss how Thiel and Lansdales were radicalized as well. For the most part, I wasn't exactly excited with this book. While there were a few people I didn't really know much about, specifically Joe Lansdale, I think I learned more about the topics through sources like Behind the Bastards, the book about Facebook, The Careless People, Empire of AI. And I also paid attention to the trials of Elon Musk. So I definitely think I learned more a bit about this in Character Limit, which I did a video about, Careless People and Character Limit kind of together. That book covers a lot more detail of leading up to Musk being forced to buy it, the kind of rationale behind it, the history of Twitter. I kind of feel like this book is just there. I mean, it talks about some of the other characters that are important, but it doesn't really do a deep investigation of any of these characters. At most, I did learn about a couple people I wasn't completely aware of, like Lansdale. But beyond him, I thought the book was pretty light on analysis. I don't think it really showed much in terms of why someone like Mark Andreessen would change his views on things. What I think was missed was an underlying philosophy that these men actually have, which explains much of their rightward move. And some of that, of course, is just power. They like being in power. They want to keep being in power. And it's important for us to recognize that. But this is also where Muskism comes in. The book really dug into the different phases of Musk's life, which I think was missing as a background for Gilded Rage. And I really think that it was helpful in understanding who Musk is and why he thinks that the way that he does about a lot of things. The book starts with his youth in South Africa, which is vitally important, I think. There was a couple episodes of Behind the Bastards about the Prime Minister of Rhodesia, which I definitely recommend watching as kind of like some other context to think about for these for these books and for these people. Rhodesia was a white supremacist country, and it was like a British self white supremacy country, whereas South Africa was Boer, which is like Belgian, Dutch, Afrikaans. Uh, Afrikaans is actually a variation of Dutch design for the country. So, and Rhodesia is now Zimbabwe. So, a lot has changed in those areas. But I remember growing up hearing about the unrest in these various different countries. And I think the history of apartheid in South Africa is critical for understanding Musk, and also explains some of the behavior after Musk bought Twitter and integrated Grok, specifically the white genocide claims. Everybody kind of knows he's South African, so is Peter Thiel, but I don't think we do enough to recognize the way that upbringing would have informed them, and the fact that whenever you're brought up in a specific type of culture like that, you have to make specific efforts to change your thoughts on the world. And Musk and Thiel, by diving into the right wing and into venture capitalism and a lot of the finances they never pulled themselves out of that sort of thinking. There's a lot of work that you need to do there. So, like I mentioned, I remember hearing about the conflict in South Africa as I grew up. I didn't really understand it a whole lot. Now I have a much better understanding of it. It's astounding to think the colonial system was that alive and well into the 80s and 90s. The only country that we see now as similar to how South Africa was at the time is Israel. But the big difference between the countries is that South Africa's Boer majority lost their rule. Nelson Mandela and his National Party were successful in their revolt against the Boer. By this time, the entire international community, except for Israel, had turned against South Africa. This is important because even the United States had turned against South Africa. This was a long time coming, but it was. The U.S. was one of the last states, and during Jim Crow, we were really supportive of South Africa. After the transition of power, Musk moved illegally into the U.S., which has been fairly widely reported at this point. It's not exactly new. He violated his visa in the way that so many other people do to stay in this country. However, he was able to make millions by selling Zip2, basically an early online mapping and phone book service. And this is one of the major tenets of Muskism, leveraging government technologies to build corporate products. Specifically, the imaging Musk took advantage of were all from the US government. Even the information he used for the phone book portion was all public information. So he built something atop a public good that made it more accessible, kind of combining two portions in a novel, early way, which was good. And kind of necessary to what we have now with Google Maps and a lot of other sort of things. But this is kind of the start of where we can start seeing him thinking about how to work with governments and how to exploit that to make money. This is something we see to this day. I mean, SpaceX is the space portion is entirely built upon government contracts. This Starlink portion is heavily driven by government contracts and benefits and things like that. So after he moved on to X payment product, this was bought by Thiel's company and became part of PayPal. This was another venture that sat atop the back of government infrastructure. However, the important tenet here that continued to carry through Musk's life is his desire to break away from governmental control over money rather than staying within it. So what I mean by governmental infrastructure, there was the transactions that happened via PayPal were secured and backed by the government, and they made sure that they would be protected whenever those transactions happened. And to break away from the governmental control of Romania, what that means is they wanted it to be independent eventually to kind of build out another monetary infrastructure, but that wasn't really possible at the time. It was difficult, and eventually they made their billions by selling PayPal to eBay. But this is kind of the start of the what you could kind of think of as the cryptocurrency movement in a material way. They wanted to try and build that infrastructure that cryptocurrency has become, which is part of the reason why Musk is a big fan of it now, back in the 90s with PayPal. Often when people talk about the PayPal mafia, they talk about Musk as if he's part of it. I think that there's kind of two camps within the PayPal mafia. There's the Peter camp, the Musk camp, which is much smaller, and then there's a bit of overlap between the two of them. But I don't think the leaders of either respective camp exactly like working with each other. They had bad blood during the PayPal days, and I think while their interests may align, I don't think they personally like each other, even though they're both South African and in the U.S. together. David Sachs, who's also another South African, he is one of those few people that kind of bridges between the two, and probably play something of a trying to smooth over that relationship. Once Musk was forced out of PayPal and it was subsequently sold, he went on to found SpaceX with a whole group of engineers from NASA. From the start, this business was intertwined with the government. Today, it operates as the primary near-Earth orbit for space, near-Earth space system that we have. Musk focuses entirely on working with the government and to build out government contracts. Slobodin and Tarnoff essentially argue that Musk only stayed solvent through well-timed contracts and successfully delivering on some of those contracts. There was a time where Musk could have certainly gone bankrupt through this, but because he was able to get contracts when he needed them, he was able to stay solvent. As we know, Tusk moved on to Tesla next. This was a rather messy takeover of the company. He ousted the original founders and through a lawsuit was allowed to call himself the founder. Tesla again leveraged government contracts and tools to help maintain profitability of the company. The carbon credits that Tesla sells to other car companies is one of the major sources of revenue. So during the Obama years, carbon credits were put into place to try and spur companies to try and make changes to use the market to try and encourage companies to make changes to their lineup of cars to make them less pollutant and all of that. And what has ended up happening, and this was an argument a lot of people had against doing carbon credits, was that somebody would end up selling carbon credits to everybody else, and those other companies would just, pay the tax essentially. And that's really what has happened. I think this is part of the reason why so many people have been bullish on Tesla is not because of the cars themselves. It's because of this fundamental layer of government backing for it, even if it's not a direct thing, because they have the most carbon credits and they don't actually really need them. They can sell all of them, and all of the other major car companies in the US use them. Even with his drop in sales, this is still helping Tesla stay solvent because of these regulations. I'm not sure if that's going to change with all the fact that there's almost $1 trillion worth of Cybertrucks out there, which is insane. But, this part is where the most obvious connection between Fordism and Muskism kind of come together. So Muskism is a direct callback to Fordism or Taylorism, which for me personally, my undergrad is in industrial engineering, and I learned a lot about Taylorism, Fordism, and some of the good things and bad things about that. And the Toyota way is kind of the where everything is transitioned. And I think it's interesting looking at some of this because now as I'm older than whenever I was an undergrad, and like thinking about how there were such good things about some of these from a general productivity perspective, but Musk strips a lot of that away. And so things are kind of worse for employees that work at Tesla than they were at Ford. So both men, Ford and Musk, drove optimization of their production lines. While Ford wanted everyone on the line to be able to afford the cars they manufactured, that's not the case with Musk. Instead, he made sure that most of the value accrued to shareholders and to Musk himself, because Musk is a huge shareholder. If you're basically, if you're going to be willing to enable someone who's just turning bolts on the factory line to buy your car, you need to make sure that that person is paid enough, which necessarily means you need to pay high enough wages that they can afford the very car that you're selling. And these were early cars. This was in the early 1900s. So the value of money was much lower. There was less inflation. So it was only like $5 or $15 a day, I think, somewhere in that range. But for Musk, with almost all of his cars, they were all, I mean, even the cheap sedan was over 30,000. That would be difficult for the people on the line to actually afford, and they certainly could not afford the Model S or the X or Y. They were just way out of their price range. So that means since they weren't paying additional salaries, the money had to go somewhere else, and that was the shareholders in Musk. And Musk himself has always had something of a approach to hardcore development, but this is where it matured into what he would take to X, Twitter, and Doge. He worked people to the bone at Tesla. He established a racist culture, which he was sued over, which was required to pay out multiple black employees during the lawsuit. Salbadane and Tarnoff argue the design of the Cybertruck is heavily influenced by the design of military vehicles in South Africa to protect the Boers during the revolt in South Africa. I find this really interesting because this is something that I really feel like Jacob Silverman should have dug into a little bit as part of Gilded Rage, because this truck is such an emblematic feature of that culture now, that if you bought this truck, you were already on the right wing side of Musk's turn. And it seems like tying it back to South Africa is kind of a natural understanding of why Musk designed it. Everybody was confused about that, and I think this is one of the only places I've read that actually offers an explanation as to why the damn truck was designed the way it was. And I think this view of Tesla makes a lot of sense. It's a very extractive approach, looking to leverage government regulations to maximize profit for the smallest number of people. He pushes people hard and rewards them for their dedication, but abuses anyone that doesn't meet his standards, even if there's nothing from a professional perspective that's failing. Just Musk's racism and misogyny baked into the cultures of his company. This is an intentional cultural choice. Culture comes down from the top. You define what the culture is as a leader. If Musk didn't want misogyny and racism in his company, he would have made sure it wasn't there. It's possible to do. But because Musk looks at people in a way that he calls them non-player characters or NPCs, where they're just kind of background people, and he doesn't really see them as real people. And this goes, again, the authors tie this back to his youth in South Africa, where there was the entire black population of the country that was just in the background, that was just there to give Musk whatever he needed. And when Musk got to the US, it was the employees he abused in the same way, forced to work hardcore because their individual needs didn't matter. They weren't the main character. Musk and the other VCs are the main characters. X, Twitter, of course, is where we saw the most extreme examples of this behavior. It's where the rightward slant Silverman talks about rears its head the most. However, based on an article on Tech Dirt, Calacanassis says the quiet part out loud, where they like having a corrupt president because they can get him on the phone and help him get rich, so he helps enrich them. They call him like a coin operated president, and that is a benefit to them. And so they didn't like Biden because they didn't have that access. So what a lot of the rightward push towards Trump is about is access to power, gaining more power. And under Biden, they had no access to the power at the same level. And they really did not like the FTC under Lena Khan because she was intentionally being a restraint on their power. So that's part of the reason why Musk would have wanted to get kind of a revenge on the people who restrained him from doing what he wanted. Musk doubled down on the hardcore behavior at Twitter and created the roadmap for managing tech workers in a lot of ways. And what I mean by that is a lot of other people looked at what he did and said, I'm going to do the same thing. And we've been really seeing that ever since. And the application of AI into that has really pushed this mentality quite a bit more. And I think that's why there's been so many layoffs. I mean, you look at Oracle and they've laid off 20,000 people because of their AI push. And I mean, I heard it from a leader just the other day. You need to be lean. You should be more productive because of AI, and you just got to deal with it. And it's not how the world works, man. There's been a wave of discontent over military entanglements and working at these with various three-letter agencies. Musk gave the other leaders permission to stamp all that down and to work more tightly with governments. I mean, there were protests about working with DARPA, with the defense industry, or various defense industries at Amazon and Google and Microsoft. Those have all been wiped out. You don't hear about that anymore. All those people were essentially fired, and it's become the way to work is through government, with government, because you get these constant and continual contracts that are for large amounts of money. And it's not just the United States government either. It includes governments like Saudi Arabia, which had spies on Twitter before, but the relationship seems stronger and more people have disappeared because of Musk's takeover. And this is explicitly called out in the book, that people have been disappeared in Saudi Arabia because of their behavior on Twitter and because there's inside people who are communicating with the Saudi Arabian government. And Doge represents kind of the culmination of all these sorts of behaviors: working hardcore, greatly thinning the workforce, leveraging the government largesse to enrich companies, and finally gutting funding for anyone that Musk didn't believe existed. Musk recently made an argument that he didn't believe he killed anyone with a gutting of USAID because there were no kids in orphanages and it was all fraud. This isn't true, of course. He's a mass murderer because of his choices. He just doesn't think their lives mattered. And I think you could look at what's happening with the SpaceX IPO as something as a coda to this book. It obviously wasn't included, but the benefits Musk got in the markets for pushing access from the banks to the rest of the public is to enrich Musk and his cronies while impoverishing the rest of the country. Musk will, and what I mean by that is the NASDAQ market allowed it to trade much earlier than historically allowed. The S&P 500 didn't, but the NASDAQ did. And that means if you have shares from your 401k in the NASDAQ, there's a real chance that your 401k already has SpaceX shares in it that are going to drop. There's also some talk of merging Tesla with SpaceX, which I don't think should happen at all. But during the Trump administration, I think it probably will. It's an obvious benefit to Musk shareholders, including Musk, or Tesla shareholders, including Musk, allowing which will allow them to become a lot more liquid than they've been in the past. And I think that's kind of important for where things are going. This is an active act of extraction and leveraging all these ways for these companies to merge is a way to extract that wealth in a way that we haven't seen before, and taking it from being a paper wealth into a liquid assets. It's paper wealth because it's in shares, but as soon as you have a mechanism for exercising those shares and you get paid out of that, then it doesn't matter. You can reinvest all of that and get rich again in different ways. I think Muskism is an important read for anyone that wants to understand the corruption of the tech world. The tech industry is running out of money and ideas. AI companies are following Musk's lead and looking to extract wealth from the US government. We see this mentality with Trump and his continued extraction of wealth from the government. So it's not going to end anytime soon until something changes and this behavior is punished in a meaningful way. So, what do you think? Did I give Gilded Rage a short shrift? Have you had a chance to read Muskism? Is there something I missed there? What do you think? Leave a comment below, and if you have any books that you'd like me to dig into, let me know. I'd love to hear it. And I want to thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good one.